So last weekend, we discussed Bhagavan's sentence, Sukshmamana manam, மூளை இந்திரியங்கள் வாயிலாய் வெளிப்படும் போது ஸ்தூலமான நாமரூபங்கள் தோன்றுகின்றன. ஹிருதயத்தில் தங்கும்போது நாமரூபங்கள் மறைகின்றன. You had translated this as when the subtle mind goes out through the portal of the brain and sense organs, gross names and forms, that is, the thoughts that constitute the mind and the objects that constitute this world, appear. When it remains in the heart, the core of our being, the names and forms disappear. While discussing this commentary, I had quoted you extensively from the book Happiness and Art of Being, page 145. Since our mind is in essence mere consciousness, and since it therefore has no form of its own, Sri Ramana describes it as subtle, whereas he describes all thoughts and external objects as gross, because they are all mere forms, images that we form in our mind by our power of imagination. During our discussion, one of the questions that came up was, since mind is a collection of thoughts, the explanation seems to imply that mind is different from thoughts. What am I missing? Morgan, did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Michael.
There was a little bit more, but we can deal with the next question afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
The term mind is, we have to understand the sense in which the term mind is used according to the context. Mind as a collection of thoughts is a gross the mind in a gross form, or it's a gross interpretation of the mind. That is, in verse 18, Bhagavan leads us from the grosser to the subtler. What he says in verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyya regarding the mind, he says, he starts by saying, Enangale manam, thoughts alone are mind. So the mind is nothing but thoughts. That is the mind in its totality. However, he goes on to say, Yavinam nanenam enname moolamam. Of all, meaning of all thoughts, the thought called I is the root. Yanam manam enno. Therefore, what is called mind is I. What this means is, that is, Bhagavan what Bhagavan is pointing out here, though the term mind is often used as a collective name for all thoughts, which is one sense in which the term mind is used, what the mind essentially is only this root thought I, because all other thoughts are constantly changing. The one thought that is constant, but so long as there's mind, there's one thought that is constant. That is the thought called I. A little earlier in the previous video, we were talking about, I was talking about verse 2 of Atma-Vidya. There, Bhagavan describes ego, this thought called I, as the one thread on which all the various thoughts are strung. This is the one constant thought is the thought I. Why is this thought I constant? What is the difference between the thought called I and all other thoughts? Other thoughts are all jada. No other thought is aware of its own existence, nor is it aware of anything else. But this first thought I is endowed with awareness. That is, it is what he refers to as chit-jada granti. Chit-jada granti means it's a knot formed by the entanglement of what is aware and what is not aware. What is not aware is the body, but what is aware is the chit portion of the ego. That chit portion of the ego is what enables ego to be aware of other thoughts. So all thoughts exist only in the view of this first thought I, namely ego. This ego is not the pure awareness. It's not awareness in its original condition because it is mixed with adjuncts. So it is sometimes referred to as Chittabhasa. Chittabhasa means a semblance of awareness. Why is it a semblance of awareness? We need to understand that. We need to understand the nature of real awareness. Real awareness is never aware of anything other than itself. It's what is called pure awareness. It is aware only of I am, not of anything else. But as ego, we are not only aware of I am, firstly, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, and consequently, we're also aware of so many other things. Being nothing other than I am actually exists. So being aware of other things is not real awareness, it's a false awareness. It's a Chittabhasa. It's often translated as a reflection of awareness. That is one sense in which it's used. But abhasa, the primary meaning of abhasa is a likeness or a semblance. When you look in the mirror and see your face reflected in it, you're not actually seeing your face. You're only seeing a likeness of your face. In the same way, ego is a likeness of awareness. It's not awareness in its pure condition. It's awareness mixed up with adjuncts, and therefore consequently being aware of phenomena, which is not real awareness. Being, as Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Uludunaptu, Jnanamam Tane Me, oneself who is awareness alone is real. That's referring to pure awareness. That is, we alone are real. Nānavam jnanam ajnanamam. Awareness which is manifold or various is ignorance. What he means by nānavam jnanam, in an earlier version of that same verse, the term he used was nāna vaikankindra jnanam. That means the awareness that sees as many. What actually exists is only one thing. Ourselves who are awareness. That's all that actually exists. But now, when we are seeing all this multiplicity, we are seeing that one thing as these many things. So in that earlier version, he said he described it as the awareness that sees as many. So that's what he means here by nānavam jnanam. The awareness that is many means the awareness that sees as many is ignorance. So being aware of many things is not real awareness. It's only a semblance of awareness. So, but coming back to this verse 18, ego, this first thought I is unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada, whereas this first thought I is endowed with that quality of awareness. So it's only in the view of this first thought I, but other thoughts seem to exist. So all other thoughts depend for their semi-existence upon the semi-existence of ourself as ego. When we rise as ego, as in waking and dream, we're aware of so many other thoughts. And here what Bhagavan means by thoughts, he's not just people often in English, when we talk about thoughts, people think about the mental chatter that's going on in the mind. But Bhagavan uses the term thought in a much broader sense. He says, the world is nothing but thoughts. That is, what is the world? The world is not, as he says in verse 6 of Uludunaptu, the world is nothing other than the 5 kinds of sense impression. That is sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. Take away these 5, and where is there any world? So the world is nothing but these. So the world is nothing but it's only our perception. What we call the world is only our perception of the world. That is it. The images we form in our mind of this world is what we call world. So the world doesn't actually exist independent of our perception of it. So since our perception of it is mental, what we take to be the world, all the objects of this world, the tables and the chairs and the computers and the cars and the trees and the apples and the rice and all these objects that make up this world, and the moon and the sun and the stars and everything, all the phenomena that make up this world, they are nothing but mental phenomena. In dream, we see all these things, all the types of objects that we see in the waking state, we see the same type of objects in dream. So long as we're dreaming, they seem to be real. We assume there's a world out there, there's a sun and a moon and there are people and all that exists out there. But when we wake up, we understand it was all our own, a figment of our own mind, a mental fabrication, a figment of our imagination. So just like that, according to Bhagavan, our present state is just a dream. So all what we take to be physical phenomena, actually just mental phenomena. That is, they're perceptual phenomena, and perceptual phenomena means mental phenomena. So according to Bhagavan, all phenomena are just thoughts, because he uses the term thought in the sense of mental phenomena of any kind whatsoever. So our perceptions, our memories, our feelings, our emotions, our likes, our dislikes, all are thoughts. Even the ego who sees all these things is itself a thought. So Bhagavan uses the term thought in a very broad sense. So when he says thoughts alone are mind, this whole universe is included in that. That is, there's nothing other than all these things are nothing but thoughts. And those thoughts collectively are called mind. But what is the essence of this mind? It's only this thought I, because all other thoughts exist in whose view? Only in the view of this ego, this first thought I. That's why he concludes by this verse by saying what manomenal, that is yana manomenal, literally means what is called mind is I. Actually, he doesn't even say what is called. He says calling mind is I. That implies what is called mind is I. The implication here, what the mind essentially is only this first thought I, the ego. So, so the mind, if we analyze it, we can say mind consists of two parts: the subject and the object. The subject is ego. All the other thoughts are objects. So when he's talking in this sixth paragraph about when he says when the subtle mind comes out through the sense, through the brain, through the portal of or through the doorway of the brain and sense organs, what he means by the subtle mind here is the perceiving element of the mind, the subject, the ego, in other words. So when the ego comes out, goes outwards, when our attention goes outwards through the brain and sense organs, then all these gross names and forms appear. Why does he say the mind is subtle and gross names and forms the names and forms of gross? The mind, what is the mind essentially, is just ego. And as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, ego is just a formless phantom. So as a formless phantom, it's got no form of its own. So something that is formless is far more subtle than anything that has form. So the subtlest of all manifestations is ego. When we rise as ego, we grasp the form of a body as I, and we allow our awareness to go out through the five senses, and we project all this world. So what Bhagavan is saying here, why he describes mind as subtle and everything else as gross, because everything else is forms. Even our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, all these are forms. Even our desires, they're subtle forms of form, but still, compared to ego, they're still relatively gross. I mean, there are degrees of subtleness and grossness. So some thoughts are more subtle than other thoughts. Obviously, the thoughts that appear outside as if outside as the physical objects of the world. They are very gross thoughts. There are subtler and subtler thoughts. The subtlest of all, the thoughts in their subtlest forms are what are called vasanas, which are the inclinations to, of the ego. But subtler, but even than those vasanas, is ego itself. Have I answered that adequately, or was there more? Oh yeah, the question was, since the mind is a collection of thoughts, yes, the mind in one sense is a collection of thoughts, but the sense in which Bhagavan is using it here is in a deeper sense, in the sense of ego. When ego goes out through it's not actually ego, it's the ego's attention that goes out through the senses, but in effect we're going outwards. Because what is attention? It is a focusing of our awareness. And what is that awareness? It is only ourselves. So it's ego, when ego is focusing its attention, that is, we can't separate ego from its awareness. Ego is Chittabhasa. It is that reflected awareness, and that semblance of awareness. And that semblance of awareness, because it's aware of many things, it can't be aware of, it can't focus on all those many things at the same time. So it has an ability to select what it is aware of. Among all these many things I'm aware of, I focus my awareness on one thing or another. That is what we call attention. So when he says, we can also say here, when he says when the mind goes out, when the attention goes out, but that attention is not anything separate from ego. It is the ego's focusing of its awareness on other things. But what is our aim when we're following Bhagavan's path? Not to allow the attention to go out, to turn the attention back within. What does Bhagavan mean by outside and inside? According to Bhagavan, everything is, all phenomena, all thoughts are outside in a certain sense. That is, they are something other than ourselves. So even our thoughts, our emotions, our vasanas, they're all outside. What is inside is only ourself, I. So when he talks about, in terms of the practice, that is outside and inside, but obviously they're relative terms. So they may be used in slightly different sense in different contexts. But in the context of this practice, when Bhagavan talks about turning the mind within, he means turning the mind back towards I alone. So that's why he says in the second part of this sentence, actually it's two sentences, but divided by a semicolon, when it remains in the heart, that means when the ego or mind remains in the heart, that means when it's turned inwards, the names and forms disappear.
Right. So basically, you're dividing the mind into two components: the subjective component and the objective component.
Yes, yes.
And the objective component is a collection of thoughts, and because you divide it into two components, the subjective component can be referred is subtle, and the objective component is grosser than the subjective component, and that's why it's referred to as gross.
Yes, yes.
Is that?
Yes, yes.
So,
but this is one way of analyzing mind, but the term mind is used in different contexts, in different sense, in different contexts. For example, when Bhagavan, in the 16th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, when Bhagavan describes what is the practice of, he defines what Atma-vichara is, he says, Sadakalamum manate Atma-vichara kutan Atma-vichara menderpaya. That is, the name Atma-vichara refers only to the practice. The word practice isn't there, but it's just for explaining it in a clear way, to the practice of always keeping the mind fixed in self. Their mind is used in the sense of attention. So, and there are other senses. For example, the five sheaves. The mind is that is they talk about the mind is sometimes described as antakarana, and that antakarana consists of four functions. Sometimes people consider it as four parts, but Bhagavan has clarified it's actually four functions. The grosser functions of the mind are what are called the mind. manam. The subtler the mind, than those grosser functions, is buddhi, the intellect. But the grosser functions are called manam or manamaya kosha. The subtler functions are that is the discriminating, judging, reasoning faculty. Function is called buddhi or vijnanamaya kosha. Subtler than that is chittam, the will, which consists of all the vasanas. That is what is called anandamaya kosha. Subtler than that is ego. Ego is, these other three are koshas. Ego itself is not a kosha. Ego is that which identifies all the 5 koshas as I. So the ego has the subtlest function of all. That is, if you study Vedanta according to the old text, they describe what is the function of ego is abhimanam. Abhimanam means sometimes it's translated as attachment, but it's more than attachment. It is the appropriation, the identification. When we misappropriate, when we say I am this body, these 5 sheaves, we are misappropriating something which isn't us. We are taking as ourselves. So that misappropriating, that abhimana there means misappropriating. So what is the nature of ego? It misappropriates 2 things. Firstly, it misappropriates it misappropriates its substance. It misappropriates from Sat-Chit. It has no substance of its own. It's got no form of its own. So it misappropriates the substance from Sat-Chit, and it misappropriates a form from this body, these 5 sheaves, and it conflates them together and thereby becomes Chit-Jada-Granti. So ego's function is to lay claim to these things which don't actually belong to it. The ego has no substance of its own. It's got no form of its own. That's why Bhagavan describes it as a formless phantom. It's formless because it's got no form of its own. It's a phantom because it's got no substance of its own. Then how did this formless phantom seem to exist? Firstly, it borrows its substance from Sat-Chit, and it borrows form from the body. So sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but we need to understand from each particular context in what sense the term mind is used. It can sometimes be referred to thoughts collectively. It can sometimes refer, generally when Bhagavan's talking about it, more often than not, Bhagavan is using the term mind to refer to ego. But it can also mean the attention, as in fixing the mind in self. That means fixing the attention in self. Like in English, we say, we use the term mindful. There's even a type of meditation that Buddhists teach, mindfulness. What does mindfulness mean? It means attentiveness. If you're mindful of something, you're attentive to it. So mind also means attention. It also means certain grosser functions of the mind, like perception, memory, thinking and emotions, all these grosser functions of the mind. That is sometimes what is referred to as mind, to distinguish it from the intellect, the will, and ego. So any term, we need to understand from a context the sense in which it is being used. There's so many terms we use in day-to-day language whose meaning is context. Is context specific. That is, it's according to the context. We have to determine what meaning it has. And mind is one such term. The term mind is used in so many different senses. So we shouldn't confuse one sense with another.
I think that explains, I think you already explained there was a follow-up question. Why is Michael referring to mind as consciousness? And I think you could go ahead and explain it. I'll let you explain that. Yeah.
But obviously other thoughts are not conscious. They're all jada. The only element of the mind that is conscious is ego. Ego, because ego is chit jadagranti, it has that chit element. It has misappropriated its existence and its awareness from sat chit. What actually exists, what is actually aware, is only sat chit. But ego has misappropriated that. So as ego, we feel, yes, I am aware. I exist and I'm aware. So we borrowed that I am, that awareness I am, we borrowed from sat chit. And we borrow a form from the body. So what ego essentially is, which element of ego is essential? Is it chit or is it jada? No, jada is incidental. The reality in ego, the real element of ego, is only that chit element, that sat chit element. So that in that sense, the mind is conscious. So that is the essence of the essence of mind is ego, and the essence of ego is the consciousness or awareness I am, and that is what we actually are.
Well, thank you, Michael. So that was really good explanation, because these are two questions that that were not properly, we couldn't address it last time. So thank you.
You also mentioned, you said that in reply to this question of why is Michael referring to the mind as consciousness, you said, I think he means to say transitive consciousness. Or
exactly, transitive consciousness, awareness of Suttarivu.
Suttarivu is a term that Bhagavan used in Tamil. Suttarivu and Chittapasa are one and the same thing. It's a different way of describing the same thing. Suttarivu, suttu means to point out or show. So Suttarivu is the awareness that is showing. In other words, the awareness of anything other than ourselves is Suttarivu. That's a term that Bhagavan often uses. That pointing aware literally means pointing awareness. In other words, or pointing in the sense of showing, the showing awareness. So, yes, that's what I mean. The mind is Suttarivu or Chittabhasa. It's not the pure awareness is what Bhagavan sometimes referred to as Suttatra Arivu. That is the Arivu that doesn't show anything. The awareness that it just is as it is, but is aware of nothing other than I am. But the awareness that shows all this is mind or ego.
Oh,
so that is, as you say, it's not our fundamental awareness. Our fundamental awareness is just I am, the pure awareness.